Picture this, a multi-million-dollar deal, a massive infrastructure project, and it's all hanging by a thread. Then a single letter gets sent and the entire agreement is just torn to shreds. But here's the question. Was that even legal? Okay, let's get into it. So our story kicks off with the Nangong project in China. We're talking about a huge facility for producing desalinated seawater. And at the heart of this whole thing are two businessmen, Mr. Eng, who's selling his shares, and Mr. Ma, the majority shareholder who's looking to buy them. They signed a share purchase agreement, and that's when it all went spectacularly wrong. And this is where it gets really puzzling. The case went to court, and the first judge ruled that Ma's termination of the contract was perfectly valid. But then it gets appealed. The Court of Appeal looks at the exact same facts, the same contract, the same timeline, and comes to the complete opposite conclusion. They said the termination was invalid. So how does that happen? How can two courts be so divided on the same set of facts? Well, the answer lies in the timing of one critical letter, and believe it or not, a state visit by the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Let's unpack this legal mystery. First things first, we need to understand the deal itself. Because this wasn't just any agreement, it was a multi-million-dollar deal that hinged on one very crucial condition. The agreement itself was pretty straightforward on the surface. Ma would buy Neng's shares for 13 million RMB. Simple enough. And this is a big but, there was a major catch. It's what lawyers call a condition precedent. What that means is the deal would only go through if another separate operational agreement for the whole project was signed by a very hard deadline, October 24th, 2016. If that deadline was missed, the contract gave Ma the power to just walk away. And that brings us to the first big reason the appeal court flipped the decision. It has nothing to do with complicated negotiations or legal jargon. It has everything to do with a simple calendar. So, take a look at this timeline. On October 21st, Ma sends an email with a letter attached saying he's terminating the agreement. But remember, the deadline wasn't until October 24th. He literally jumped the gun by 3 full days. The appeal court saw this as a fatal flaw. You can't just terminate a contract because a deadline hasn't been met when the time to meet that deadline hasn't actually run out yet. On October 21st, the right to terminate hadn't legally even come into existence. It's kind of like a professor failing a student for an exam 3 days before the exam is even scheduled. It's just premature, and legally it has absolutely no effect. And this quote from the court's judgment really says it all. The termination was invalid, plain and simple, because the trigger event, the deadline passing, hadn't happened yet. Now, the court could have just stopped there. I mean, the termination failed on this technicality alone, but they decided to dig a little deeper into the fairness of the whole situation. So the court moved on to explore this really fundamental rule of fair play in contract law. It's known as the prevention principle. And this is the key question the court asked next. Let's just pretend for a second. Let's say Ma had waited until October 25th. The letter would have been on time, sure, but would the termination itself have actually been fair and just? This is where that prevention principle comes in. It's a well-established idea that basically says you cannot take advantage of something not happening if you are the one who prevented it from happening. It's a principle that's all about good faith, not just finding loopholes. Think of it like this. You can't padlock the kitchen and then complain that your roommate didn't make dinner. So the big question became, did Ma padlock the kitchen? The court started digging into the evidence, and what they found, well, it turned the entire case on its head, and it all centered around that Prime Minister's visit. At the trial, Ma's position was pretty simple. He claimed he was just a hands-off investor, a director in name only, not really involved in the nitty-gritty of the negotiations for that operational agreement. He argued that the delay that caused the deadline to be missed had absolutely nothing to do with him. But the evidence? It told a very, very different story. Far from being hands-off, Ma was actually leading high-level negotiations. He's the one who personally invited the Prime Minister of Malaysia to witness the signing, and he orchestrated the whole event for November 3rd specifically to fit the Prime Minister's travel schedule. Of course, that decision made it completely impossible to meet the October 24th deadline. And the real kicker, he sent his termination letter the very same day the PM's visit was confirmed. So what this all showed was that Ma was not some passive bystander. The court found that he was actually in the driver's seat, controlling the timing of everything. This is where you see negotiation strategies start to blur into something else entirely. He wasn't just waiting for a condition to fail. The evidence really suggested he was actively making it fail. And then came the moment of truth. Under cross-examination, Ma was asked directly if he was holding out on the signing for his own commercial advantage. And his response, straight from the court transcript, was, in a way, it is yes, okay. It was a direct admission that he was engineering the entire situation. So, with all of this evidence now on the table, let's look at how the appeal court put all the pieces together for their final verdict. The court's reasoning was crystal clear, and it really rested on two main pillars. First, the termination notice was sent too early, which made it invalid from the get-go, a simple matter of timing. And second, even if the timing had been perfect, the termination still would have failed because of the prevention principle. Ma actively prevented the condition from being met, so the law simply would not allow him to benefit from that failure. So, what's the really crucial takeaway from this whole case? It's that your actions, your conduct, can be just as important as the actual words written in a contract. The law expects people to cooperate in good faith, not to deliberately sabotage a deal and then try to hide behind a deadline that they themselves made impossible to meet. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? In the high-stakes world of business, we all know people play hardball. It's part of the game. But this case shows that there is a line. So the question we should all think about is, when does smart strategic negotiation cross over into conduct that actually breaks the fundamental rules of the game?